Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our call today. We're going to get started in just a few seconds. We're going to wait and see how many other folks join us in the next minute or so. Give everybody just a little bit more wiggle room to join us, and then we'll begin. Before we get going, I just want to see, is Christopher Kush on the line just yet? If so, simply unmute your line by hitting #6, or if you're calling from a computer, you can hit the unmute button. Okay, I've just heard from Christopher. He's on his way in, and we'll be able to do a sound check in a moment, and then we'll begin.
I am here.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for joining us, Christopher.
No problem.
With that, we can get started. I'm going to kick us off with some housekeeping notes and a bit of a welcome, and then we'll break into some information about Soapbox Consulting, which will be facilitated by Christopher Kush. So thank you, everybody, so much for joining us and for taking on this important role at our Advocacy Summit next week. We are just so excited to have you all come to DC and join us for this important event. You may know that our theme for the event is Empowered to Live Yes, and we are empowered to live yes when we connect with each other, educate our legislators so that we can change lives for people with arthritis. Just say hello. My name is Julie Eller, and I'm the Manager of Grassroots Advocacy for the Foundation, and I have had the pleasure of putting together our information and our plan for the 2019 Advocacy Summit. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. We're going to start off our call today to talk about the legislative asks that we're going to bring to Congress, and then we'll talk through the role of a state coordinator, and we'll talk through our summit agendas. These three elements will help you prepare all of the things you need to know and your questions as we approach our event and get closer to your leadership role as a state coordinator. So to kick us off, let's master the asks with what you need to know before you go. This year's Advocacy Summit is a particularly exciting one. We're pulling in some of the learning that we had from our smaller Platinum Ambassador Assembly from last year and channeling it into this year's event. One of the ways that we're doing that is by preparing our training modules for all participants as on-demand videos that they can watch ahead of the event. So far, we have 4 modules available on our Advocacy Summit webpage. 3 of those are specific to learning the asks, understanding how our members of Congress work on the House and on the Senate side, and a preparing for the summit video. Each video has its own nuance and flair. To learn the asks, we'll go through some of the slides that we talked through on our video module, but I encourage you to watch that for a bit of a deeper dive into what we're going to be bringing to our legislators. The Legislative 101 video talks through the differences and what you can expect when you go into an office on the House side versus an office on the Senate side. How should you collect information from the staff there, and how can you think about following up with the staff after the event? Our Preparing for the Summit video is a little bit different. It walks us through how we can do some legislative research ahead of the event to go through and understand who our members of Congress are, what key committees they might sit on, what their voting pattern was or their sponsorship pattern was in the last Congress, and whether or not they sit on the Congressional Arthritis Caucus. Our goal is that all of our participants at the summit this year will come armed with a little bit of background knowledge, having watched each of these videos. So the great thing about being the state coordinator for your state and your teams is that when you have folks come, we're hoping that they're maybe less overwhelmed than they might be otherwise because they've had some opportunities to dip their toes into the water through these modules. We also have a video on the virtual summit, and we're going to be posting live a full Know Before You Go video that recaps all of our asks, information about getting to and from the hotel, and so on tomorrow afternoon. So all participants will receive a reminder email to watch these videos, to interact with our modules, and to prepare for the Advocacy Summit. One thing that you can do as a state coordinator is to really watch these videos, take a look at them, interact with the materials, because we might have some of our participants from your states who have questions about those things and want to touch base with you about specifics from the videos. Now let's talk about our legislative asks. This year, we are doing our legislative asks a bit differently to continue how we carry on some of those learnings that we had from the Platinum Ambassador Assembly last year. So we'll have two primary asks this year at the Advocacy Summit. The first and the most visible is our ensuring patient-centered reforms to step therapy requirements ask. So we're hoping to reform step therapy nationwide. Step therapy is, of course, a process where a patient might go to their doctor, talk about their symptoms, and their doctor and the patient decide together what the best course of treatment might be. But before being able to access that course of treatment, the insurer might come in and deny coverage for this treatment because it's higher cost. They might want the patient to go through 1, 2, or even 3 rounds of failing on a different lower cost alternative drug before being granted access to the one that their doctor had originally prescribed. Our goal is to reform this process to make it truly patient-centered and to make sure that patients have access to the care that they need when they need it. We'll go into a deep dive on step therapy if you watch our legislative training video that we mentioned before. Our next ask is to strengthen the Congressional Arthritis Caucus. We know that we have one of the largest bipartisan caucuses on Capitol Hill through the Congressional Arthritis Caucus, and our goal is to grow our numbers with our new 116th Congress to make sure that our freshman members hear our message, and anybody that we missed in the 115th gets to join our ask. And the third ask is going to be, and this is the new part, will be tailored to your home state. So the third ask is going to be reflective of our precision advocacy goal. Precision advocacy means that we're tailoring our ask to the member of Congress so that we can provide an ask to them that might have the highest likelihood of coming to fruition. So we've looked at key committees and what committees they sit on. We looked at their voting pattern from years before, what their personal stories are if they have a connection to the military, and we've assigned some precision advocacy asks to each state for the legislative meetings. So each state has their own secondary ask, is what we're calling it. And as the state coordinator, it'll be part of your role to make sure that everybody in your group has a heads up on what the secondary ask might be. The secondary ask will be deployed in our Advocacy 201 training session. So it won't be given to everybody as a part of our 101, but each of our state coordinators should have 1 or 2 members in the 201 intermediate training session that day to learn the ins and outs of these asks. We also will provide all state coordinators with cheat sheet talking points on any of these things, so you don't have to worry about putting something together or doing any extra legwork. It's all been done for you. Our three secondary asks are likely familiar to you. The first is that we address the nationwide shortage of pediatric rheumatologists through loan repayment programs. That's an easy ask. We know that we have 300,000 children in the U.S. with arthritis. We know that we have fewer than 400 pediatric rheumatologists that serve the whole country. We want to provide access to kids by providing access to doctors to pursue affordable medical school. The next ask is to establish a dedicated arthritis research program at the Department of Defense. We want to make sure that we have consistent funding at the Department of Defense to study arthritis, partly because we know that arthritis has a prevalence that's much greater in the military and veteran community than it is in the general population. 1 in 3 military veterans has arthritis compared to 1 in 4 in the general population. And when we think about military readiness and capacity to serve, we know that we must serve our military population so that they can remain healthy, happy, and whole as they move through their careers in the military and beyond. We also know that any research that is conducted at the Department of Defense will benefit all patients with arthritis. Our third ask is to increase funding for the CDC Arthritis Program. The CDC Arthritis Program is the sole program dedicated to arthritis research nationwide that's government funded, and we want to make sure that we continue to maintain the funding that we have, but also to increase that funding so that we can expand our reach. Unfortunately, the CDC Arthritis Program only has funding in the green states in your map right over here. But we know that arthritis is the leading cause of disability in the United States. So we want to make sure that the funding for arthritis research is proportionate to the problem. Ideally, we'd like to increase funding to more than just these states that are indicated here. You'll learn more about these asks as we move through our summit, so I'm not going to spend too much more time on them here. But what's important is that you know that your delegations will be primarily focusing on step therapy reform and strengthening the Congressional Arthritis Caucus, and that a secondary legislative ask will be available for the folks who are going through our 201 training session. And what they'll learn to do is how to have a structured meeting talking about these two primary asks, and then also indicating an interest in one of these secondary legislative asks. Our goal is that our participants will follow up with a thank you note to their legislator and the staff person that they met with, and include a one-pager for one of these secondary legislative asks following the Advocacy Summit. Our team will certainly help to make sure that this follow-up occurs so that we can make sure that these secondary legislative asks get to our offices. One additional talking point that we want to discuss with you now is just to be aware that there is a lot of conversation and attention in Congress right now surrounding drug prices. It's important that you are prepared to respond if ever a drug pricing question could arise in one of your member of Congress's offices or one of your meetings. And what we're hopeful for is that you'll respond by letting your member of Congress know that the Arthritis Foundation does not take a particular position on drug prices in isolation, but does support efforts to look at the healthcare system as a whole and the impact of the patient. And if they have any really specific or nitty-gritty questions about drug pricing, you can just tell them that they can connect directly with the Arthritis Foundation advocacy team and provide our contact information to them. We'll be happy to answer anything that's more nuanced. What you can focus on in your meeting are, of course, those primary legislative asks that we just addressed. So how are we going to package all of this up? What are we bringing to Congress? Well, our Leave Behind materials are excitingly simple this year. We have our Welcome to Congress packet that includes all of our legislative ask information. So rather than having 6 or 7 cumbersome Leave Behind papers, you have one saddle-stitched book that includes a welcome letter to discuss arthritis in our country and prevalence and why it's important. You have a map that indicates the prevalence, the one we just showed before, a deep dive and spotlight on the issue surrounding step therapy, and our proposed solution through step therapy reform legislation. It also covers all of those secondary asks. So rather than bringing in another one-pager to send off into those members of Congress's offices, we can open up our booklets, talk through our step therapy ask, reform ask, talk through our secondary ask, and also show them the list of all of our members of Congress and our ask for strengthening the caucus. So this is kind of our main vehicle, but we wanted to couple that with some real state-specific information. So we've also included in our Leave Behind folders a simple state fact sheet that covers things like prevalence data in your state, how many people are limited or have work limitations due to their doctor-diagnosed arthritis, what kind of comorbidities exist, and what is the cost of arthritis nationwide. These two materials coupled together can really help to strengthen your asks as you go to Capitol Hill. We've also included in your materials business cards, so you'll be able to write your first and last name, your home address, and any contact information that you would like to on an Arthritis Foundation champion card. You'll be able to include this in your Leave Behind materials, so as your member of Congress or their staff person hands you their business card, you'll have one that's branded with our Arthritis Foundation information to exchange with them. Now let's talk about some follow-up materials. In any of our welcome folders that each Advocacy Summit participant will receive at registration, there will be 3 blank pieces of stationery. It is our hope that each of our participants will write up a thank you note, handwritten, that accounts for their story and just says thank you to their member of Congress for being their representative or being their senator and listening to constituent stories. We'll be able to insert these thank you notes into our Leave Behind folders before going to Capitol Hill so that we have a handwritten touch point from the constituents in your state to your members of Congress. As state coordinator, it'll be part of your role to make sure that each of our participants in your state delegation has either writes the thank you notes and includes them in those Leave Behind documents, or if they're not comfortable with that, making sure that maybe you write an extra one, or maybe we make sure that there's a different touch point there. We'll also include in those welcome folders for all participants our follow-up, follow-through guide. Our follow-up guide will include information about our Advocacy Summit, information about how to find the Capitol address, the district address, the email addresses of our legislators so that we can send our follow-up emails thanking our members of Congress and their staff for the meeting and indicating to them that they'd like to continue the relationship. This follow-up, follow-through guide even includes draft letters that will allow our participants to really lean in, have a structured letter that they can modify, share their story again, and also to indicate what that secondary ask is by including an attachment to a more in-depth guide or one-pager that your member of Congress and their staff can use. So we're going to shift gears a little bit here. We've talked about our legislative asks. I want to encourage you, if you have any questions that you'd like to chat in, to please use the chat feature in your WebEx tool. We'll also take questions live at the end of the briefing. But let's talk a little bit about state coordinators, what you need to know before you go. Well, first, let's discuss what a state coordinator is. A state coordinator is a leader from each state to organize the delegation, keep track of and distribute materials, to be knowledgeable about the asks for Capitol Hill, and to ensure follow-up from the delegation. Now that sounds like a run-on sentence with a lot of responsibilities. So let's distill it down just for a moment. A state coordinator is going to be the main point of contact between your state delegation, which could be made up of sub-teams or could just be one smaller delegation, to make sure that everybody from your home state feels comfortable and confident in their experience at the Advocacy Summit. Now, we understand that there are lots of people who come to the Advocacy Summit, but state coordinators are not doing this alone. We have a wonderful team of state advocacy directors of our DC-based advocacy team who will be happy to help make sure that we are connecting with you all, connecting with each participant, and being able to answer any questions that might come up. let's look at some specific bullet points. A state coordinator will work with each team from your state to make sure that they feel comfortable with the materials. So that includes our Welcome to Congress packet, it includes our follow-up, follow-through guide, and so on. And we'll be happy to share all of these materials with you, each and every one of our state coordinators, ahead of the event, so you have some time to review it. One thing that we're really excited for this year is that we're going to be using an Advocacy Summit workbook. Each Advocacy Summit workbook has state-specific information that will help our participants really understand our asks, help to workshop their one-sentence stories, and even help to capture any notes and contact information that they have or collect during their meetings on Capitol Hill. We have a lot of these tools that are going to be packaged in the welcome folders for each participant, and your job will mostly be to help make sure that everybody has these tools, is able to use them, and is able to ask any questions of our team. You'll be the coach for your delegation to keep your meetings on topic. You'll ensure that all of our Advocacy Summit attendees know where to go and at what time. So if we have our legislative meetings on Capitol Hill, you'll be the person to look at the schedule and say, all right, well, we're in this Senate office building now, and we have to get to our House building over on the other side of Capitol Hill by 1 o'clock. Let's make sure that we all leave here by noon to make sure we get there with lots of time to find the appropriate office. You'll also be in charge of accounting for all materials for distribution. So when we distribute our legislative schedules, the schedules for each of your meetings, you'll be receiving our Leave Behind folders, and you'll be in charge of making sure that the members of your delegation get the appropriate ones for their meetings. You'll also be in charge of making sure that people feel comfortable reading their schedule and understanding it. You'll have an opportunity to meet with all of the advocates from your state prior to going to Capitol Hill to form your plan. Something that's new this year that we're very excited for is that we're seating all of our delegations with each other. So not only will all of the states sit together, but also the specific members from the delegations or teams that are going to the Hill together will sit at the same table. We have table numbers available where everybody is able to go when they enter into the general reception room. So you'll have lots of face time. You'll get to meet your delegations at breakfast and at lunch for our working delegation lunch, where you'll have a guided discussion about your Hill meetings and plan your plan. And also during the Excellence in Advocacy dinner. You'll have lots of face time with the people that you're leading and lots of opportunity to build a relationship with them if you have not met them yet before. You'll also have the opportunity to just stay in contact with everybody. So we want you to use your cell phone throughout the event, share your cell phone number so long as you're comfortable with that. Make sure that everybody from your delegation has that number so that they can call, and so on. We'll also have an exciting opportunity for you all to take part in our virtual summit advocacy campaign by using your virtual summit sign to take a photo with your delegation and post that on social media. Finally, you'll be able to help us make sure that everybody is accounted for. So if someone from your delegation doesn't have a schedule, you'll be able to contact Soapbox at their helpline, which the phone number is here, but also we'll have a help desk throughout the event that you can go to talk live to make sure that we facilitate a change there. At the event, state coordinators will have orange ribbons for their badges. One final thing that I'd like to mention is that state coordinators will be helping to make sure that if your state delegations want to do drop-offs to their state members of Congress who will not have meetings during the event, it'll be up to you and your delegation to decide who will take and drop off leave behind materials to which members of Congress. Our team will be very, very hands-on to make sure that you know which offices are close to each other, how you can make sure to get these things together, and so on. With that, I am going to shift gears and introduce Christopher Kush from Soapbox Consulting to talk through our helpline and talk through all of the amazing work that his team is doing to make sure that you all feel comfortable, secure in your schedules, and so on. So thanks so much, Christopher, for joining
Great.
us.
Oh, no problem at all. And you are doing the amazing work. So we are able to see that when we contact congressional offices and we're able to schedule. I do have an interesting statistic related to that. So we have about 80 of your meetings are scheduled with members of Congress so far. And if we add the highest level staff on the Hill, who are chiefs of staff and legislative directors, we come up with 92 meetings. So a little bit more than 50%, about 53% of your meetings are already scheduled with members of Congress or with the absolute top staff people in their legislative offices. That's a reflection of the work that you're doing through this program. So it is paying dividends. You will hear me talk about the importance of staff level meetings on this call, but also when I am in front of the group. But your folks will be experiencing about every other meeting should have the member of Congress popping by or the most senior staff in the office, and then every other meeting will be with staff. So that reflects the relationships you've built and the high level of access you have. So in terms of, we just heard that you will be taken care of in terms of a state group leader. I have a couple things to show you so that you know what things look like as this all comes together. So I'm going to show them to you now, and then I'm, of course, happy to take any questions you might have at the end. I will say this, that as your event grows, it becomes extremely helpful to us, especially with your new advocates who do not know what to expect. So they're not novices so much, or they're not people who don't understand arthritis so much as they just come to this event not knowing what's going to happen the next day. And for them to have somebody who understands what materials they should have, is able to make sure they're connected with their teams, will be present with them during those initial meetings on Capitol Hill, makes a huge difference in how they feel about the event, the comfort of the event. And if they're comfortable, they come back and we can keep building our army. So state leaders, I salute you. It is an important part of growing, but it's also an important part of making those new advocates feel comfortable during their first trips to Capitol Hill. So one interesting map I want to show you, you've got 100 new members of Congress. I will tell you that those 100 new offices are in all kinds of different levels of completion in terms of their staffing. So your scheduling is going well. But whenever there's a national election, you have all kinds of offices that are kind of learning how to meet with constituents and learning how much staff they need. And the one thing I want to say that is so important is that the number one thing a state leader must be able to do in front of the novices is to smile. Your novices have taken a significant amount of time, in some cases a significant amount of money to come to Capitol Hill, and you know as an experienced advocate that there will be a little flexibility required, that meetings can and do change on Capitol Hill. You know that there is nothing out of the ordinary and nothing that is a waste of time about meeting with staff. And in all of those cases, it's important that we convey to advocates how the Hill works. That this is just, yes, the meeting time moved, it happens, not, it's such a shame. Yes, we're meeting with staff, good. We know somebody who's going to contact us all year. This isn't a waste of our time because the member wasn't in the meeting. So part of it is just being able to convey to them, if they ask you, is this normal? Should I be expecting this? Is being able to smile and say, yes, it is. This is how we work. You're going to take it all in stride. Come on, stay by my side. We're doing well. Okay, next slide. Now, when I ran this map, we had 261 participants. I think we're still about the same, 37 states. Of course, people come and go a little bit. But this is pretty close to the meetings that you are all going to do almost at the same time when you come to town. So a lot of coordination is necessary. When we're all up there on the Hill, you're going to conduct about 211 meetings, getting close to half of the U.S. Congress, all in the course of a short business day. We will be meeting with Democrats. We will be meeting with Republicans. I see we're even meeting with an independent or two. So staying nonpartisan is, of course, a very important skill to learn when we do this legislative work, which is different than the work people might do in the political sphere during election time. So you'll want to be prepared for meeting different kinds of party members in these offices and conveying to your advocates that it's okay if you don't belong to the party of the person who represents you. They still represent you, and that when we come to town, we sincerely ask everyone to help support the issues we need to fight arthritis. Okay, next slide. Now we get to the meat of the matter. So your advocates will all receive a mobile tool code at the end of this week. It's not an app. It's simply a website. Those of you who've been here before know what it looks like. You just go to a website and you put in your own individual code and you can see your schedule in real time. It's important that your advocates use the mobile tool because those times can and do change. So your advocates will come to town already knowing something of their meetings and who they're going to Capitol Hill with. Nonetheless, we're going to seat you by state, so you'll be seated by state, and if you have more than 5 people from your state, we heard that you might be broken into smaller teams to hit those house side meetings. So you will all be seated together, and you will help us distribute the printed schedules. And the point of that is A, people who hate to use their phones for everything will have a great way to find out where they're supposed to be and to keep track on Capitol Hill. But the other thing is that you're helping us check in with your teams as delegations. This is not about people knowing what their own personal meetings are. This is about us very quickly being able to see if everyone arrived from every state, if there's any meetings we have to cancel, if anyone didn't get a schedule who needs one. That all happens very quickly with your assistance when we hand out the paper schedules. I'm going to show you some things that are on the paper schedules just so you know the stuff that your advocates will be looking at. So you got their name and address in the upper right-hand corner. You'll have their team members' names underneath that. The team members' names, this is a group that will go together to all of their meetings on Capitol Hill. So if you've been to the event before, you will remember that teams stay together and that they have a full day of advocacy, which includes both Senate meetings and then their rep, but maybe the rep next door to them, so that we're able to put people in teams and nobody has to go alone and nobody has just a few meetings. Everybody has a more robust day. So when I look at these arrows, and Julie, I know you have pressed some of those arrows, but you can see there is that Soapbox help desk. We'll be on site when these go out, but once your folks are on the Hill, they are more than welcome to call us. We are going to call you if something changes on the schedule. So the mobile tool has push notifications, so people will be getting text messages if something changes on their schedule. But they are always welcome to call Soapbox if they need any assistance, if something's not working out, they can't make it to a meeting. We will be also calling you if something changes. The mobile tool code is printed on the schedules so that anyone who comes to town and says, everybody saw their schedule, I didn't get my code, or I registered late, whatever reason, the code stays the same. It's printed on their schedule for convenience. Again, remember, there is nothing to download. It is simply a website. They just need to know their own personal code so that they can see their team's list of meetings. Okay, let's press forward and see what other arrows we have. That's the list of team members for each team. Your list of meetings will be in time order. Those meetings are very detailed, and there's a full guide at the bottom of the printed schedule to let people know what they're looking at. So the things they're looking at, we will note if somebody belongs on a key committee. We will note what the title is for each staffer you're going to meet with. We will note where the meeting is located, the buildings and room numbers. We will note if somebody is a new member of Congress, if they're a senator up for re-election, if they belong to our caucus or have already co-sponsored our bill. So all of that's on the front of the schedule. You will, when we distribute those, we'll be asking you as a team leader to have those teams look at their schedules together and let us know. Did anyone not make it to town on the team? Is anyone that needs to be on that team here but doesn't have a schedule? And maybe most importantly, particularly at the end of the day, are there any meetings that nobody on the team is going to be able to attend? On the back of the schedule, you're going to see a printed map, so everybody will be holding that. They can see the buildings where the Senate meetings are. Accessible entrances are marked, along with places where they can find food in specific legislative buildings. If you press forward, you can see that the House, press forward just one more time. I'll get back to that arrow. You can see where the House office buildings are located, again, with accessible entrances marked, places where food is available. There's even a guide to how to find your room number using the abbreviation we provide on the schedule. That little dot in the middle of the street on that map, that's the final thing I want to show you, and that gives you an estimate of the walking time between House and Senate buildings. So the easiest way remains to this day to go from the House side to the Senate side or the Senate side to the House side. The easiest way to get there remains to go outside and walk the 4 large city blocks between sides of the hill. For those people who are not comfortable doing that, it is extremely common to take a taxi cab ride from one side of the hill to the other. This guide here with the estimated walking times give you a sense so that teams can plan how much time they need to move between their meetings. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And this shows you the mobile tool. So this is what people will start looking at on Friday. And on the left-hand side, you'll see what the icons look like when they first log in. There's a place in the upper left-hand corner where they can press schedule, and they will see their schedule in time order on the right-hand side. So a couple things we wanted to let you know. Before they come to town, they're able to see their schedule. They're able to see their team. We do prefer that they use this tool for information, so in other words, that you not provide an alternative written format of the schedules for the advocates, because this version will stay accurate in real time. On the right-hand side, you'll see there's a couple icons for each meeting. One of them is the feedback icon, so you'll hear us telling folks to have at least one person who attends each meeting give feedback to your team in Washington, D.C., so that they have some details for follow-up. Oh, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Yep, right where the arrow is moving. We've added a little Get Me There button that you can use. It'll take Google Maps, open Google Maps, and show you how to get to that building on your schedule. Please remember, if you are already in the Senate office buildings or you're already in the House office buildings, they are all connected through a basement hallway. So for the buildings next door to each other, much quicker to not use Google Maps and just use the basement hallway. And finally, there's a meeting roster button. Well, on the Senate side, everybody from the state will be invited to those meetings. So those meetings will be a little bit larger. So advocates can use that to see the names from all the teams who will be available or who will be attending the Senate meetings. But on occasion, a few folks from the national office, somebody Julie has coordinated to attend your meeting because it's a key member of Congress, somebody will be joining your team. And in that case, you can press that if you're curious, is this one of those meetings where somebody else will be joining us as an additional advocate? A couple things to keep in mind. We are going to request, and we have requested, every single meeting be 1 hour apart. So we've thought of that, and we've pushed it, and we've done our best to schedule that. In some cases, there will be meetings that are a half hour apart. And if you see any of those or your advocates ask about them, the first thing they'll suggest is, why don't we ask if those meetings can be an hour apart? So we will already have tried that. The Hill is scheduled through negotiation in a way. So it's not as easy as moving, let's say, like a doctor's appointment or something of that nature, where you assume you've got the whole calendar open to your convenience. So it will be difficult if there's a half-hour scheduled meeting to find an alternative time. It will also be difficult if people want to just space out their meetings evenly because it looks good or makes them feel like, the day will have an even amount of energy. We'll just let you know, because they might ask you first, that the Hill will be extremely heavily scheduled on that day. So fudging a meeting time for the sake of smoothing things out, probably not going to be a request that's going to be easily filled. So just a heads up for you. Okay, let's move forward. I've talked about all those things. When your advocates get to town, in addition to their printed schedule, they will have these instructions of how to use their mobile tool, which they will have already seen, that focuses them on sending the feedback and attaching a photo to the feedback form so that your team in DC can document and plan and plot strategy forward from the advocacy day. So you're going to have lots of tools. Again, nobody will come to town not knowing their schedule who wants to see it. So you're halfway there, but they will be looking to you to kind of make sure the teams check in, to kind of make sure that the leave behind folders that will go to the different House and Senate meetings get distributed, and also for you to be the point person with the Soapbox Help Desk in case they have any final questions. Okay, next slide. These schedules, these printed schedules, will go out after what we call the logistics presentation. So this is what it looks like. After I speak for about 15 minutes describing and showing a typical schedule, going through what they can do with the mobile tool, we will be handing out one white envelope to each state. And that white envelope, inside it, has an individual schedule for everyone we have registered. So you're going to grab that white envelope. You're going to reach inside, hand out the schedules to all of your advocates at your state, and you're going to do a couple things for us. You're going to take any schedules that don't get claimed, so somebody who's not in town yet or didn't make it, put it right back in the white envelope. You'll note anyone who didn't get a schedule and needs one, maybe it's a late registrant. And you'll take any other questions, comments, or needs from your group, put it in, or note them all down, and you will be the person who returns to the Soapbox Help Desk so that we can quickly go through everything your state needs to get them ready for the Hill the next day. Next slide. The question is, before I turn over, the question is, what are you going to have? Well, you will have an individual schedule of your own. That is what we call your natural schedule. But we are also going to provide you what we call a state master. So in that white envelope, you're going to have a special packet that shows you all of the teams of your advocates, how they're divided up in terms of the meetings that have been assigned to each team, and you will have their cell phone numbers and emails. So you are going to have a master playbook for your state. You will also remain the primary contact for us as things change on Capitol Hill. There will be a couple changes during the day the next day. If anything challenges a group or they have any questions, you might be the one to call the help desk. Remember, in addition to distributing materials, we are asking you to train the new folks in their expectations of how Capitol Hill actually works, and to teach them how to take in stride if a meeting time changes, if they have to have two meetings that are closely scheduled together, if they have to be able to find food and take a break and have something to eat in one of the cafeterias. Also, the normalcy and the importance of meeting with staff. All that will be going on as you escort your groups around Capitol Hill. And then we're also available just a phone call away if you need any additional assistance. So that's a lot of information that I gave you. So I'm going to wrap it up there. And I'm going to turn it back over to the rest of the presentation, but I will stay on the phone, and I'm happy to answer any other questions you have.
Christopher, thank you so much. That was really, really
You're
helpful,
welcome.
and I loved those tips and tricks you gave.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you. My favorite among them was the importance of smiling through the event and making sure that if you have a smile on your face, that the others will too. I think that is just some valuable life advice, not just for the summit.
It is.
So right now, I'm just going to zip through our Advocacy Summit agenda, give you all a heads up on what we've got going on over the next couple of days, and then we'll have some time for questions. In the meantime, if you want to write in any questions, please feel free to use that chat feature so we can address them immediately when we get to our questions area. So to start us off, there are going to be 3 summit programs. Our first will be our full advocacy summit for all adult participants over 18 years old. The summit agenda that we're going to talk through really focuses on those adult sessions. We'll also have a junior ambassador summit available for teens 13 to 17 years old. And finally, a children's or our kids summit for all children under 12 years old. At each of these different programs, we'll have, for the kids and teens, age-appropriate lessons that can teach them about the importance of advocacy and sharing their story, how to share their story for the specific asks that we have, and how to be a part of these Hill meetings the following day. All participants will join the full day of sessions on Monday, and then also the full meetings, regardless of age. So you could have some very young advocates joining your meetings. So let's talk through the agenda. Sunday and Saturday are both travel days for many of our participants. Registration will be open and available from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. that evening. That's where you'll pick up any of your welcome folders for the event. You'll be able to flip through any of the resources and make sure you get comfortable with them ahead of time. From 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., we'll be having an invitation-only Platinum Ambassador reception. So if you are a Platinum Ambassador, you've already heard all about this event, but it's our time to recognize you, provide an opportunity for awards, and fireside chat with our CEO, Ann Palmer. On Monday, March 11th, we'll have registration open all day. We'll have a morning wellness and yoga session from 7 to 8 a.m. in case you are hoping to stretch out your bodies before we have a long day of programming and sessions. A continental breakfast will be a time for everybody to eat and fuel up before we pass our kids off for their kids summit. From 9 to 10 a.m., our adults and our teens will be joining us for the opening session. That will be followed immediately by a new event at our summit for a Capitol Hill panel discussion. We'll have some members of legislative staff from Capitol Hill join us at different levels. We have everyone from a legislative director to a health policy advisor joining us to talk about the different ways that advocates can make an impact on them throughout the year. We'll have a transition and a coffee break before we do our advocacy training sessions. A word on our advocacy training sessions. The 101 is a mandatory session for first-time attendees. We want to make sure that you are able to be there and have any nuts and bolts and get the whole rundown from our team. The 201 session will be really focused on secondary asks. This will be that session where we go through and look at the state assignment and talk through how to make that secondary ask in the meeting. The 301 session will be devoted to leadership training for advocacy committee members and Platinum Ambassadors. We'll run down our legislative asks and then break into some ways to engage and mobilize our grassroots communities throughout the year. We'll have a transition to lunch, and then we'll have our working lunch and delegation meetings. This is when you'll be able to meet with your teams, your delegations, identify what your plans will be for the following day, any speaking roles that might be relevant, and really hammer home any of those lessons that we've had today. We'll identify anyone who isn't able to join us, make sure that we have all of our scheduling done, and move through the rest of the evening or afternoon. From 1:30 p.m. to 5 p.m., we'll offer 4 different breakout sessions. Each attendee will choose 3 sessions to join. We'll have one session that's about the Live Yes Arthritis Network that demos an Connect event module that's dedicated to advocacy. We'll have a fireside chat with Ben and Chris. This is a session that's focused really, really hard on state-level advocacy, especially with the Department of Insurance. Chris will be our special guest representing the Ohio Department of Insurance. We'll have a Precision Advocacy Through the Year session that gives everyone an opportunity to learn how to set goals for themselves and for their immediate grassroots communities that can help grow our grassroots networks and engage our volunteers locally. We'll also have a fun session of Family Feud to go over all of the learning from the morning. This session will be a little bit of a relaxing brain teaser for our teams and make sure that everybody has a moment for levity throughout the day. Then we'll have an hour and a half break between our breakout sessions and our dinner. At the Excellence in Advocacy dinner, which starts at 6:30 to 8:15 p.m., we'll have opportunities for our volunteers who have achieved amazing awards this year, the Platinum Ambassador Award, the Edward M. Kennedy Award, the Emerging Leader Award, and so on, to be recognized. We're also proud to be recognizing both Representatives Brad Wenstrup of Ohio and Raul Ruiz of California with our Advocacy Leadership Award for members on Capitol Hill. So we'll have some guest appearances there as well. Finally, we'll close out the day with a Advocacy Committee Chair Meetup session. It'll be a 45-minute opportunity for Advocacy Committee chairs by invitation to join us and talk through how they can bottle up some of the excitement and the learning from the day's event and channel it into some action opportunities for their committee. Finally, on Tuesday, we'll have a checkout opportunity with the hotel, any final delegation meetings with your teams, and a continental breakfast available. From 7:45 to 8:30, we'll have a closing and a send-off where we go through any housekeeping notes and make sure that everybody has what they need. Folks will be able to store their luggage at the hotel from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then we'll have our Hill Day meetings. One important thing to note is that we'll be using a mobile tool called Lyft, L-Y-F-T, to facilitate our transportation from the hotel to Capitol Hill. We'll have an event code or coupon that can be used so that your ride will be on us. And in our Know Before You Go video, we'll talk through all of the ways to facilitate these rides and what to do if you have a wheelchair accessibility need for securing your ride. So watch that video for more information there. But the great thing is that you'll be able to take your car directly from our hotel to the Hill office of your choice. So you can go specifically to the House office rather than to the Senate side and decrease some of your walking time on the day of. That concludes our agenda session, and I want to spend the last few minutes that we have together answering any questions that you might have. I haven't seen any come into our chat feature, but if you'd like to ask a question live, you're certainly able to just by unmuting your line and asking away.
Julie, Ted Cadwell here.
Hi, Ted. How are you doing?
Good. Wondering if you could go over again the secondary asks, and then I know there were certain states that were listed there.
Sure, absolutely. Let me escape out of my browser here and pull this up in a different way so I can slide right up to that slide. And we'll be sharing this with each of you. So this secondary legislative ask information goes through our 3 different opportunities for our second legislative asks. This week, what you can expect to see is an email from each of our state directors. That email will include what your secondary ask for your state should be, include some specific talking points about that ask. I'm sorry, there seems to be a timer on that slide, but some specific
my question
points.
is, I guess, my question was, is I hadn't checked this list. Does that mean that each state is represented once in each of these 3? Because I didn't check to see it, but I'm assuming that means that we've covered all 50 states with one of these 3 asks. So you will have one of these 3?
Yes. So
okay.
each 50 states, each of our represented states at the summit will have one secondary ask that we've assigned. Yes. And you'll get any of that information ahead of the event.
Yeah, why are those particular ones picked out for that state? Just curious as to.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did a precision advocacy exercise with our team. We went through all of the committee assignments for each of our members of Congress from these states. We looked at their previous voting patterns and whether or not they had a particular interest or experience with one of these three opportunities. And then we used that data to identify which of the asks would have the highest likelihood for success. And so then we identified that ask and decided that that's what we would use for the whole state. So if there was one state that had a particularly compelling thing, we were going to dedicate that secondary legislative ask for the whole state, not just for one member of Congress, to make it universal and streamlined and easy for each of our state coordinators and our delegations as well.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Great. Hearing none, what I'll say is that you can direct any follow-up questions directly to my email, jeller@arthritis.org, and I'll be happy to either answer them live, connect you with our state director so that you can have an opportunity to chat with the person who covers your state as a part of their region, and connect you with any resources that you might need to succeed at the Advocacy Summit. So thank you everybody so much for joining us. We're really thrilled to have you as a part of this event and thankful to have you here as a state coordinator for the Advocacy Summit. And please don't hesitate to reach out for any help. Christopher, thank you so much again for joining us. It was just a great time to have you and your insight on the call.
No, thank you. Thank you for the work that you are all doing. You make our job easy.
Oh, thank you. And go team. I appreciate all the advocacy we've done so far, and we're looking forward to doing some more. So with that, I'll let you go, and I look forward to seeing you in Washington in just a few short days. Have a great one.